The chains never stopped singing, not in the moonlight, not in the frost-cracked silence between breaths. Even now, in the dead hush of snow-laden trees, I could hear them, a whisper of silver against skin, each link a cold echo of what I was and what I might become. They bound my wrists, my throat, and my heart. I had fled under a blood moon, through brambles and burial fog. The villagers didn't chase me this time. They didn't need to. They'd said their prayers, salted their doors, left meat in the snow. They believed I would vanish into the forest like a storm passes through a village. That, like all wild things, I'd wither in the cold or be swallowed by wolves greater than I. I almost wished it were true, but the wolf inside me did not die. He waited. He always waited. The snow deepened. The world faded to white and breath and bone. Hunger clung to me, but it was silence that gnawed deepest. Silence, and the memory of her voice. She had come first in dreams, a pale figure crowned with frost, her lips the color of twilight. She did not flinch from the beast. She did not scream, or spit, or pray. She welcomed me. There is stillness in the snow, she had whispered, and freedom in surrender. I had woken with frost on my lashes and blood beneath my nails. The next night, I walked. She found me in a glade of frozen trees, where the moonlight seemed carved of silver flame. The wind died when she appeared. Even the wolf held his breath. She wore a cloak of falling snow. Her eyes were the color of ice just before it breaks. Poor beast, she said, touching the chain at my throat. You carry your shame like a collar. I could not speak. My tongue was heavy with growls. My skin itched with fur just beneath. I know what you are, she said, and what they made you believe. She raised one hand, and the chains unraveled like mist. The silence shattered inside me. I fell to my knees. In her palace of ice, there was no pain, no hunger, no moon to call the beast. I stayed in a room where frost patterns bloomed like stories on every wall. She gave me furs and food that melted like memory. Each day she spoke to me. You are not wicked, she would say, brushing snow from my hair. Only wild, and the wild should not be leashed. Sometimes, she sang to me, strange, lilting songs of cold rivers and stars that wept light. I felt the wolf curl close inside me when she did. He liked her voice. So did I. But the cold never left. Not truly. It seeped into me like water through cracks. I did not change beneath the moon, but my breath grew fainter, my skin paler. The boy I'd once been, the one who cried when his sister left offerings outside his cell, he became a shadow. One night, she brought me to a mirror of ice, not to see me, but what I could become. In it stood a beast of snow and talon, fur like drifting ash, eyes like frozen stars. My hound, she said, my winter wolf. Her touch burned cold on my cheek. You won't have to feel anymore. No more shame, no more fear, just stillness, obedience, purpose. Part of me howled yes, the other part trembled. That night, I dreamed of my sister, her voice, her warmth, the way she'd once unwrapped a silver chain with trembling hands and whispered, "You're not just the monster they say you are." I had snarled at her, told her to run. I remember the tears that froze on her lashes. I had thought it mercy, now I wasn't sure. I stood once more in the glade, chains gone, eyes clear. She found me again, as she always did. You came back, she said, smiling. You've chosen. Yes, I said, my voice thick with frost, but not for you. Her smile faded. You would return to pain, to hunger, to the curse. No, I said, I will carry them, because they are mine. She stepped toward me, the air cracking with cold. You'll die alone. Better to die myself than live as something else. She sighed. Snow fell harder. The wolf within me howled once, but I did not change. I walked into the trees, not toward warmth, but toward the unknown. My breath steamed in the air. My heart beat slow but steady. I was still cursed, still hunted, but I was free. Rain lashed the stone towers of Glathenhold as I arrived, a cloaked stranger among nobility. The guards sneered when they saw me, mud-streaked, road-worn, barely more than a roomer in boots. But the old steward had no room for jest when I presented the seal, the medallion of obsidian, an antler, the mark of the lost house. His lips trembled as he bowed. "Your Highness, if your claim is true, the trial awaits." I said nothing. My hands clenched the seal tight enough to draw blood. They led me through the hold. Grey corridors hung with fading banners, torchlight flickering against stone older than song. I had never walked these halls, yet something inside me whispered of them. A breath behind each door, a shadow at the edge of thought. At the heart of the keep stood the trial chamber, colder than the storm outside. In it, a mountain of feather mattresses stacked to the rafters, bound with velvet cords and dusted with lavender. A child's tale turned ritual, the trial of the bone. The steward intoned, "Sleep upon the stack. If royal blood flows in you, your dreams will stir. If not," he looked away, "then the bone will remain silent." I climbed. The higher I went, the more my limbs ached, as if each step dragged centuries behind it. At last I lay atop the tower of softness. The down cradled my spine. Perfumed linens wrapped me like clouds. But beneath it all, somewhere far below, I could feel it, a sliver of something cold, old, wrong. They say it is a fragment of the first king's rib, carved from the body before it was ever laid in a tomb. They say it pulses with the weight of 1,000 crowns. They never say what it does. Mont, not dreamed, remembered, but the memories were not mine. I stood in sunlight, sword wet in my hand. Around me, a field of broken men. My armor gleamed like molten brass, the crown heavy on my brow. Cheers rose from the hillside, but all I heard was breath wheezing from a dying throat beneath me. "Mercy," the man croaked, "and the king?" I gave none. "Mont," I woke gasping, my skin cold, despite the weight of 100 blankets. The steward stood at the foot of the stack, eyes gleaming with hope and dread. "You felt it," he said. "You dreamed." I nodded. I did not tell him what I had seen. He called for the council. 3 days followed. Feasts, questions, tests of lineage. The nobles paraded their wisdom, debating names and banners and bloodlines. I let them speak. I let them marvel at the seal, compare my features to portraits a century old. But I saw how they looked at me, when they thought I wasn't watching. Not with joy, with fear. On the 4th night, I returned to the bed, not out of command, but compulsion. And again, I dreamed. On stone walls ran with blood. A woman screamed behind a closed door. I, wearing the crown, always the crown, pressed my hand to her mouth, and whispered of duty, of legacy, of son stronger than mercy. She spat in my face. I left her weeping, and ordered the flames to be lit beneath the gate. Mont, I awoke shaking. The velvet sheets felt like ash. My heart thudded not with fear, but recognition. Each night I returned, not for glory, not for proof, but because I had to know who was the first king, whose rib now lay beneath my sleep, and what was it that stirred in me with each dream, guilt or inheritance. The final vision came on the 7th night. The king stood alone, blade dripping, the throne behind him carved of antler and iron. Around him, a court of statues, stone faces locked in agony. He looked into the mirror, and I saw my face looking back. "You are not my heir," the reflection said. "You are my reckoning." When I woke, I did not weep. I rose. I dressed not in royal silk, but traveler's leather. The steward met me at the gate. "You've passed the trial," he said. "They will crown you by dusk." I looked to the banners fluttering on the high wall, to the people gathering in the courtyard below. So many faces lifted to me, waiting for a king reborn. "You don't want what's in me," I said. He opened his mouth, but I was already walking. Aunt, I left the hold that night, not as a prince, not as a fraud, but as a man who had tasted the marrow of a kingdom, and found it spoiled. The crown was never a thing worn on the brow, it was a weight in the blood, passed bone to bone, curse to curse. Let them keep their throne, I will carry the dreams instead, and perhaps someday, bury the bone where no child will ever sleep again. They say the king no longer weeps, not for sorrow nor beauty nor joy, not since the day the bird came to court. It sits upon a silver perch beside the throne, cloaked in filigree and precision, a clockwork marvel delicate as frost, with feathers of copper lace and eyes of onyx flame. When it sings, the whole court falls silent, and I feel cold. I was just an apprentice once, no name worth remembering, no robes, no titles, just soot under the nails and burn scars on my knuckles. I belonged to Master Elon, the last true artificer in a kingdom that no longer cared for such things. He was bent and brittle, hands twisted with age, but his mind was sharper than any blade. I watched him draw beauty from brass and breath, wind life into dead things with gears and whisper songs. He built toys for nobles, traps for hunters, charms to keep cradles from evil dreams. But his greatest work was the bird. He crafted it over the course of one long fevered winter, whispering to it day and night like it was a child of flesh, not wire. He poured something into it, more than skill, more than song, something heavy, something dear. It will be my final gift, he told me, as the snow turned to ash, for the king, to bring him joy again. I didn't know then what price he paid. Swears when the bird was done, the king's men came. They gave me coin to keep silent, and carried Master Elon's body away with the bird beside it, still humming soft lullabies. I never saw my master again, but I heard the bird the next morning. Even from the edge of the city, its song reached me, clearer than bells, purer than any bard's throat, each note a thread of silk drawn across the soul. People wept in the streets, even the wind stopped to listen. The king called it nearer, and nearer sang only for him. To first I marveled like the rest. I told myself this was Elon's dream fulfilled, that his death had brought beauty eternal. But something gnawed at me. The bird did not rest. It sang from dawn to dusk, never faltering. The court bard, Master Herlin, a man with a voice like river light, was dismissed within a week. Too many flaws, the king said. Too much humanity. That was when I started sneaking into the palace. I knew the tunnels. Elon had once helped repair the waterworks beneath the throne hall, and I'd followed him through the stone belly of the castle. It wasn't hard to slip in, night after night, and watch from the shadows. The bird sat unmoving by day, its feathers twitching in rhythm with the court's breath. At night, it would retreat to a small alcove behind the throne. Its nest, they called it. That's where I found it. The souls, they hung in crystal threads, faint as candle smoke, faces I recognized. Herlin among them, his eyes hollow, his mouth forever shaped in silent song. The bird pulsed gently, feeding on the light of them. With each breath, it grew warmer, more alive, and I knew it was not perfection that gave Mira her voice. It was cost, the soul of my master, the soul of Herlin, and gods knew how many more. I tried to speak to the steward. He laughed. I begged the queen. She stared through me, and the bird kept singing. One night, I crept into the alcove again, heart hammering. I carried a small tool, nothing more than a gear pick and a vial of soul salt. I didn't know what I meant to do. Kill it, free them. But Nira turned to me before I touched her. Her eyes flared, burning and black, and she spoke. You seek to break me. The voice was not Elon's. It was all of them, layered and discordant. The queen's laugh, the steward's cry, Herlin's final note. You seek imperfection. Yes, I whispered. Better flawed truth than stolen beauty. She did not scream. She sang. It was the saddest song I'd ever heard. A lullaby of all the souls she carried, their hopes, their joys, their final thoughts before the bird took them. A harmony so pure, it tore at me, begging to be remembered, to be loved. Then she fell silent, and the crystals shattered. The souls rose free and bright into the high beams of the throne hall, and Mira slumped, wings folding. I left the city that night. The king never wept again, not because of magic, but because without the bird he had forgotten how. I carry one of her feathers with me still. It hums when I hum, off key, always, but honest. They say ghosts don't feel cold. I used to wonder if that was true. Huddled in alleys and under broken eaves while the snow bit through rags like knives, I used to imagine what it would be like. Not to shiver, not to ache, not to need. But I've learned something worse. Ghosts remember warmth, and they want it back. It started with the embers. They weren't mine. Not really. I found them in a rusted tin buried in the ashes of the ruined chapel, deep in the quarter where even rats feared to tread. The tin was blackened with old soot, sealed with wax. Inside were coals, still glowing. Somehow, they pulsed with a strange light, not orange, but pale blue and deep red, like blood frozen under glass. I should have left them. Instead, I sold one. Nisa, a woman in mourning robes, stopped me on the street. Her eyes were cracked and hollow. "Do you have any flame?" she whispered. I offered her one of the embers. She stared at it. "It's warm." She paid me in silver. Then she cupped the ember in trembling hands. It didn't burn her, but I saw her eyes change. She looked through the snow, past the gray sky. "Leorin," she breathed. "My son." She wept and smiled, and the ember flared once, then vanished. When I touched the tin again, the embers inside pulsed faster, and I began to see things. That night, I lit one to keep the frost from my fingers. The warmth was like nothing I'd ever known. Not fire, something older. It soaked into my skin, into my bones. I sighed and curled closer, and then I saw him. Me, but not this me. Clean, fed, sitting at a hearth beside a woman with my eyes and a man with my chin. A home, a family. I watched them laugh. I watched me reach for stew. The ember winked out, and I was alone again. Nisa. I kept selling them. They were in demand. Word spread fast. The poor came first, desperate to see children or lovers or mothers lost. The rich came after, curious, then obsessed. Each one lit the ember and saw something different. Not just the dead, but lives that could have been. And every time they used one, they looked colder afterward, like the ghosts had taken something from them, like they'd left a part of themselves behind. I should have stopped, but I was so hungry, so I burned another. Just one. This time I saw a tower, a warm bed, velvet drapes, me again, older, noble, laughing with lords and ladies. No more hunger, no more cold. The vision ended, but I felt it linger. A pull, a whisper. "You belong here." The embers began to hum at night. They shifted in the tin like coals disturbed by wind, and the air grew thick with whispers. Low voices behind the walls, footsteps in snow that wasn't falling. I tried to stop selling them. I buried the tin in a drain pipe, but they came anyway. The mourners, the seekers, the cold. A man cornered me near the docks, coat crusted with ice. His eyes were glazed. "Give me another," he rasped. I saw her. "I need to go back." I told him they were gone. He wept, then laughed, then walked into the river and didn't come out. The embers came back. I woke one morning, and the tin was by my side again, open, and inside, more than before, dozens, hundreds. I hadn't counted them before. Now I couldn't stop. I lit one. I couldn't help it. This time I saw myself at sea, free, wild, laughing on the rigging with salt wind in my teeth. Then snap, gone. Another, a scholar, robed in rune ink speaking to kings. Gone. Another, married, smiling, holding a child who called me Papa. Gone. 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 The world around me began to thin. The snow didn't melt anymore, even near the flames. Shadows gathered even in daylight, and always, the same faces lingered on the edge of my sight. Mine, from the visions watching. They didn't blink, they didn't breathe, but they hungered. Ty tried to burn the tin. I hurled it into a pyre outside the city walls stoked with stolen oil and prayers. It hissed, and when the fire died, it was still there, waiting. I don't remember the last time I ate. I don't feel hunger now, only the pull, the warmth, and the cold just beyond it. Tonight, I sit in the alley behind the candle merchant's hall. Snow falls in soft spirals. The wind has teeth, but I hold an ember in my palm. It glows faint. I was born from a knife's whisper and a father's tears. He carved me from heartwood, curled and smoothed with care. Only grief can guide. His hands were cracked with age, his eyes red-rimmed, and his shop smelled of dust and cedar. He spoke to me as he worked, not nonsense, but memories. "You'd have had your mother's eyes," he muttered, sanding my face smooth. "Your smile would have bent the world." I didn't know what he meant. Not then, not yet. He shaped me no taller than a man's hand, limbs fine and nimble, with joints that clicked softly like a wind chime. My chest was hollow, save for a crystal sliver set where a heart might go. He poured something into that place, hope, or maybe sorrow, when he whispered the name he'd chosen, one he'd given before once, to a child buried too soon. I opened my eyes, and breathed. The dollmaker wept when he saw me move. Not with horror, not with wonder, just quiet, weary joy. "You're home now," he said. "You're safe." But I wasn't. In the kingdom of Halvarin, dolls like me were forbidden, declared abominations by decree, mockeries of life. They called us traps for wandering souls. They told tales of puppets turned violent, of golems that devoured their masters, of dolls who whispered at night and grew fangs by day. I didn't have fangs. I didn't want violence. I just wanted to be his. We lived in secret. By day, I stayed still on a velvet cushion in the front room. By night, he taught me letters with chalk on old wood. I danced on the table while he played the lute. He told me stories, and I asked questions he didn't always want to answer. Why don't I grow? Why do you cry when you look at me? What was the first me like? He never answered that one. They came for him when I was 3 winters old, not children's winters, mine. The inquisitors had heard whispers, glimpsed me moving through the shutters. They stormed the shop in red robes and silver masks, blades that hummed with runes. He told me to hide. He begged me to stay still. But when they struck him, I moved. I threw myself at them, fists of splinter and thread. I screamed in my tiny voice, "Leave him. He's all I have." They shattered me. A boot crushed my chest. A blade sheared my leg. My maker wept again, and then he was gone. I don't remember what happened next. Just darkness, then fire, then a box. When I awoke, I was no longer in Halvarin. I had been sold to a collector, a duke with a taste for cursed things. He kept me in a glass case beside a jar of manticore teeth, and a painting that blinked when no one watched. I could move only when he said the word, a command word, like a leash. He made me dance for guests, spill wine into goblets, crawl across polished tables like a trained insect. But I listened, and I learned. I escaped on the back of a sparrow, a palace servant kind and limping, left my case ajar one night. I whispered thanks and leapt. The sparrow had seen me dance, said she liked my spirit. She flew me far into the marshes. She said, "You don't belong to anyone now." I asked her, "Then who do I belong to?" She didn't answer. Others found me, A mole priest who tried to gild me in gold leaf and call me divine. A toad merchant who tied threads to my arms and sold tickets to see the wooden wonder. A clockmaker who pried open my chest, muttering, "How does it tick?" Each time I fled, each time a piece of me broke. I lost a hand, then an eye, then the shard of crystal in my chest cracked. I couldn't breathe right after that. My movements grew sluggish, the spark inside dimmed, and I thought, maybe they were right, maybe I wasn't real. In a forest of silver birch, I found the ruins of a shrine, old stones, broken altar, forgotten gods. There I collapsed. The moss grew over my limbs. I let it. But one night, beneath a full moon, something called, not a voice, a sound, carving, a child, hands stained with soot and sap, trying to shape a whistle from wood, failing, crying. I remembered my father's hands. I stood, and I walked. The boy screamed when he saw me, but I smiled, crooked and broken. "I won't hurt you," I said. "I just want to help." He let me. Together we carved the whistle. I showed him how to follow the grain, how to breathe warmth into the wood. When it sang, he laughed, and something inside me clicked. Not in pain, in healing. He brought me home. His mother screamed, then wept. Not in fear, in recognition. She'd lost a daughter once, she said. She saw her in my face. Not the features, the hope. They let me stay, with new wood, new joints. A glass eye gifted from a fallen statue. A copper hand shaped from an old kettle. No longer perfect, but wholly mine. And inside my chest I placed a new shard, not crystal, mirror, so I could look in and always remember what I was, and what I chose to become. They still tell stories of me, the living doll, the cursed boy, but I know the truth now. I was carved by grief, yes, but I was shaped by love, and I remade myself in defiance. Not a puppet, not a plaything, a person, free. I remember the first time I burned. The spark came with a whisper, a prayer stammered through chattering teeth. In a temple grown too cold, the flame kissed the wick at the top of my head, and I awoke, not like a man wakes from slumber, more like a blade drawn from its sheath. My body, wax, shaped like a knight of old, no taller than a child's hand, grew warm. My limbs flexed. The sword molded into my fist, gleamed with firelight, and I moved. The child who lit me stumbled back in awe, his wide eyes shining beneath his acolyte's hood. "You're real," he breathed. I wanted to speak, to say, "Only while the flame lasts," but wax does not make room for wasted words. The temple was dying. I could feel it in the stone, once sanctified, now cracked. The sun no longer touched the altar. Moss crept where light should reign, and the shadows, gods, the shadows, they came each night, crawling, slithering, shaped like men, beasts and horrors with too many limbs. They craved the heat, the flame, they craved me. Each battle melted me. I swung my blade through smoke-skinned monsters. They hissed and shrieked, vanishing into curling mist, but every strike cost me something. A finger, a shoulder, the shine of my chest. Still, I fought, because the child watched me. He never ran, not even when the shadows screamed his name. He lit me again and again, each night whispering, "Please protect us." And so I did. The other candles in the temple were long dead, only I remained. My once stalwart legs had withered unevenly. One had melted entirely in a clash with a shadow bird whose beak dripped poison. I stood lopsided now, leaning always, dragging myself along with the memory of balance. But the child still lit me. He still believed, and the shadows grew bolder. One night, they breached the sanctum. The door exploded inward, and smoke poured in like a flood. The child screamed. I stood, unsteady, flickering, my body thin as reed grass, but my sword still burned. They came in a tide, Too many. I cut through the first, the second, the fifth, but I felt myself shrinking. Wax splashed the floor. My left arm fell in a heap. Still I fought. The child clung to the altar, sobbing prayers. A shadow with eyes of dying stars reached for him, and I knew, I will not last another strike. I had a choice. Extinguish my own flame. Let it gutter out. Save what little remained of me. Survive, or burn, all of me. One last blaze. Enough to drive them all back. Enough to save him. I had turned to the boy. He looked at me through tears. Please, he whispered. I nodded, and I stepped into the center of the room. I had drove my sword into the stone. I lifted my one good arm, and I burned. I summoned the last of my wax and will. My flame flared, white hot. Light filled the room. The shadows screamed, not in rage, but in fear. They burst apart like dry leaves. Smoke fled from stone. The air cleared, and I melted. The boy ran to where I'd stood. Only wax remained, a puddle, and my sword, cooled and cracked. He wept. He cupped my wick in trembling hands, pressing it to his chest. I'll remember you, he said. Always. That was the end, but not of me. A soldier's purpose is not to live. It is to choose how to burn. And I chose. I burned for him.